Day. 1 p.m., Black Duende Territory, Spirit Dimension. The sun had set about 2 hours ago, and now the surroundings were very dark for most people to be able to traverse the forest-covered mountains. For demons and creatures of the dark, however, it was the best time to roam around freely. And Mark was not an exception to this. Mark patrolled around the cave and securing that there was not a single threat nearby. He then returned to tell everyone about his plans while he grabbed a bite of dinner. "I'm going to scout the situation. Terimelio, you're coming with me this time," Mark said, slurping some cup noodles. "Okay." Terimelio agreed without hesitation. His wives were worried, but at least they understood the reason as to why Mark needed him. Their target was Terimelio's homeland. No one in this group other than him was familiar with its structure. Of course, for the long time that he left that place, some things were bound to change. At least, he would know which areas they needed to check. After eating dinner, Mark made another round of patrol before bringing Terimelio away. Everyone that was left was worried about the two. It was not surprising since Mark and Terimelio would infiltrate the enemy base. In any case, this was not the actual rescue mission. The goal of the infiltration was to scout the situation first. Of course, if it was possible to snatch away Terimelio's mother in one go, why not? Still, Mark told May to pay attention to her ring. He would contact her if things went awry. "Okay, you ready?" Mark asked Terimelio, who was now sitting on his shoulder. "Why do you have to ask? Of course not," Terimelio grumbled. Who would be ready in this situation? Several decades had already passed since he left his homeland. No one would be ready to return by being forced because of the current circumstances. He just had no choice. To secure the safety of her mother in the now crumbling world, he needed to return and take her away. Among his family members, his mother was the only one that treated him as a family. The others more or less bullied him for being a half-breed, although it was their father who was at fault. Mark did not say anything else as he opened his wings and soared towards the night sky. Terimelio's insecurities were suddenly blown away as he held onto Mark's clothes tightly. "Hey, I almost fell. I'm not like a Mihan who can fly." "Then, hold on tighter. It's not my problem if you fall for being careless. Also, close your mouth if you don't want to bite your tongue." Terimelio wanted to complain some more, but as Mark accelerated further, he almost bit his tongue. After leaving the area that was filled with poisonous plants, Mark and Terimelio entered the airspace above the mountain. "Should I land?" Mark asked. Even though it was already night time, Mark was not confident that no one would see them in the sky. "Fly until midway the mountain. Our kingdom usually had detection magic deployed around our kingdom. It's more clustered at the foot of the mountain. This way, our kingdom can monitor who and how many people entered and exit the mountains. The Black Duendes have a lot of enemies. They're always cautious." Mark followed Terimelio's instructions. He even flew as high as he could so that he would be hard to see from below. It did not take long, and they landed where Terimelio said they should. So far, there were no problems. From there, they continued on foot. Unexpectedly, there were people roaming the mountain. And all of them were demons, huh? Mark murmured as patrols entered his range of detection. They had to carefully thread up the mountain, and avoiding the patrols was not that easy. If not for Mark being able to detect them, they might have been caught already. With all the trouble they had been through, they finally reached the other side of the mountain where they would be able to see the kingdom of Black Duendes. And there it was, situated in the middle of a valley encircled by several mountains. "Is this how should it look like?" Mark asked Terimelio, but no reply came from the Duende. It seemed that Terimelio did not expect this either. The kingdom of Black Duendes measured about the size of a large town, or maybe a small city. As the stone fortress was also large itself, the size was not the issue. The problem was the appearance. A description that would perfectly fit its appearance was a demon city in fantasy novels. It was medieval-like with a Gothic twist. The whole place was surrounded by tall walls, and at the center of the town was a huge tree wrapped around a castle made of stone, it was quite a sight. However, looking at Torimelio's expression, it was not like this when he left this place in the past. Then, it just meant that the whole structure of the town was influenced by the demons, not only during the apocalypse. To fully develop a large town into something else was not easy. It should have taken several years. It meant that even before the apocalypse, there was already cooperation between the black duendes and the demons. And it was not a good piece of news. Now, what are we going to do next? Mark murmured, observing the town inside the valley. Torimelio took a deep breath. Let me. At Torimelio's words, he started chanting a language unrecognizable to Mark. And then, he snapped his fingers. But, nothing happened, Mark said, looking around and at himself. All he noticed was Torimelio's magical energy enveloping their bodies. I cast it on us. You won't see anything, Torimelio replied. He seemed to want to look smug, but he had not recovered from the shock yet. It's magic to change our appearance to the eyes of others who see us. It will be easier for us to enter like this, and we can't really show our faces either. So, you have something like this all along, Mark said, still trying to see if he could spot any change at all. I'm still a black duende, all right. We are masters of trickery and illusions. No, what I mean is that you have something like this but never used it before. Those words made Torimelio glare at Mark. It's a kind of magic with a lot of limitations, you know that? I can't just cast it whenever I wanted. The duende grumbled. Also, you need to release more of your demonic presence. I made you appear like a traveling demon. As for me, I look like a bird on your shoulder, so I won't talk too much. Will this be enough? We didn't pass through the foot of the mountain, remember? Mark reminded Torimelio. I'm not sure, but it should be fine as long as we don't encounter warriors or those that are monitoring the detection magic. Okay then, that's what you said. If this fails, it's all on you. Hey. The two bantered as they stealthily approached the vicinity of the town. As expected, it was hard to infiltrate the place without getting noticed. Not only the warriors of the black duendes were atop the walls, but there were also some lower demons roaming outside. Even using his shadow mist movement would not guarantee a safe infiltration at this point. Carefully, Mark and Torimelio circled around the town, trying to find an easier way in. Actually, Mark was already tempted to use the photokinesis mental crystal. However, it was likely to cause more harm since the enemies were not humans but duendes and demons. They had no choice but to be patient, unfortunately. Finally, after an entire 2 hours of lurking and sneaking, they managed to find a lightly guarded area all the way on the south side of the Kingdom of Black Duendes. It was entirely the opposite direction of where Mark's group came from. Nevertheless, it's strange. Why are there fewer guards here than other areas? Mark whispered. Maybe this area is not important at all? What Torimelio said was the same as what Mark had in mind. However, if they were protecting this place, it was quite odd that they would not designate the same number of people to guard this area. Nevertheless, it was a good opportunity for Mark and Torimelio to sneak inside. They monitored the movements of the guard for a bit from afar. After finding the right timing, they decided to scale the walls and move in. But then, Mark fell on his knees. They were not even close enough to the wall for the guards to spot them. Hey, what's wrong? Torimelio panicked as he looked at Mark. Mark was holding his head in pain. His face even looked pale despite the darkness. Sadness, loneliness, fear, anger, pain, despair. All of these emotions in condensed form came entering Mark's mind like a tsunami. The feeling was even worse than the time that Elisa's mind had gone chaotic. Hey! Torimelio called out once more as Mark was not responding to him. Don't shout, you idiot! Mark growled at Torimelio. Just shut up and wait until I get used to this. Mark then dragged his body somewhere else that was hidden from the guards on top of the walls. Even so, he did not retreat back as he tried to get accustomed to these condensed negative emotions. Now, Mark understood why there were fewer guards in this area. This place was not that important nor the things that were inside. After all, it seemed that this place was where the human slaves were being kept in custody. Mark would never mistake it. That flood of emotions that entered his mind just now was definitely emotional fluctuations that came from humans. And there was not only a few. There must be a few hundred people being held in this place. Just how much suffering had they experienced to have negative emotions that were enough to make Mark fall on his knees? It was no wonder that there were a few guards here. These few guards were enough to handle the human slaves, and if the infected attacked in this area, they could use the slaves as a meat shield. "Let's go," Mark said after 10 minutes of adjusting himself to the suffocating emotional pressure. If he was any weaker of an empath compared to now, and if he did not have this unique trait as a mutator, that flood of emotional energy could have driven him insane already. As the gap between the patrolling guards widened, Mark turned into a surge of black mist with Terimelio, and they swooped up the walls and into the town. And here, the awful scene was all spread out for Mark's and Terimelio's eyes to see. Sure enough, this was the area where human slaves were being kept. However, were they inside houses? Or at least, cages? No, the humans were being kept in a large cramped pigpen reeking of both pee and feces. There was not even enough space to lie down to sleep, and if there was, what they would end up lying down on was their own secretions. It was an awful situation that could make anyone puke at a slight glance. As Mark stared at this scene, the despair that was entering his head became clear and understandable. Mark's eyes were on the verge of glowing red. He wanted to kill. Tear everything to pieces. It was not because of the scene before him, but the negative emotions that continued to flood his mind started to affect him. The only thing he could do was to clench his chest. "Terimelio, let's get out of this place, quick," Mark said as he took his attention away from the pigpen. He was not here for these people. However, if a chance came, he might free them from their suffering in the least painful way. Day 22 p.m. Spire Tree Castle, Kingdom of Black Duendes, Spirit Dimension. A castle made of gray-colored stone, decorated with a large tree with its trunk and roots circling the structure. It was the abode of this kingdom's royal family. This landmark was one of the few places that were not changed after the demons influenced the development of this kingdom. It was not just some regular castle. It was a castle that was built, specifically, following the tastes of the current king of the Black Duendes. Similar to the stone fortress of the Brown Duendes, this castle was also built with large-sized. Even a 4-meter-tall giant would be able to comfortably walk through its hallways. However, the two places had different reasons. The stone fortress was built like that to accommodate guests. On the other hand, the Spire Tree Castle was like this because of the king's lust. He was a person driven by an interest in beauty, and thus, he made a harem filled with beautiful women. Their race did not matter as long as the king had an interest in a woman. The king had great control of his abilities, being able to change his size. No matter what race the woman was, he could make them give birth to an offspring. Fortunately, this king was very picky with women. So far, there were only 9 women in his harem, and all of them were top-class beauties. The unfortunate thing, however, was that not all of those women wanted to be here in the first place. Some of them were abducted, while some were blackmailed. Among the 9, only 2 were the ones who really loved the king, and 1 became his for benefits. As for the others, they were only following the king's bidding to continue living. Fear for their lives. It was because there were already instances that the king did not hesitate to kill a woman that defied his orders. And that did not only happen once but several times already. And from those women that became his queens, 15 children were born, 10 princes and 5 princesses. Of course, due to being born from different mothers, siblings from the same mother looked unique compared to others. And without a shred of doubt, this family was a troublesome one. For the cause of it all, the king named Lucario. It was all just fun and games. And as such, he was dubbed as the playful tyrant by his subjects. Currently, the playful tyrant, Lucario, was in the throne room with one of his queens, the 9th queen. Among the queens, she was the latest. and without a doubt, the bridge between the cooperation of the black duendes and the demons. After all, this woman was a succubus. The succubus. These female demons were alluring creatures. Most men would not be able to resist the temptation of embracing one even if the succubus looked like a child. Even so, Lucerio was strong enough to resist the temptation. In fact, the succubus race did enter his eyes in the past. What he was looking for was beauty among the race. Since all succubus was beautiful, it did not interest him at all, until he met this woman. Ilvela, she was a succubus among the succubus. In fact, she was among the princesses of one of their demon communities. In exchange for cooperation between the two races, Ilvela became Lucerio's 9th queen, and also the most important one. The king sat on the throne while the 9th queen stood beside him. Lucerio and Ilvela received the reports of the demons under their command. Duala's armor queen Spider is killed, you say? Ilvela asked the demon in front of her. Dregger, it was your order to send it out at the border, am I right? What happened? Dregger, he was one of the demon generals currently in command here. He was a demon with a lizard-like appearance. He had green scales and light yellow skin. Although his face looked human, the irises of his eyes were slits, and his tongue was forked and long. My apologies, but we are still investigating. Almost the entire nest had been killed, with all the survivors escaping. So far, what we found out is that the culprits were a group of individuals composed of at least 8 people. 3 of them seem to be small-sized, while they also have a large creature with them being used as their mount. We tried to follow the tracks left by it, but it seemed to be capable of flight. A large creature capable of flight. And yet, none of you managed to see it. What use are your soldiers? First, the ambush had failed to kill all of those warriors due to interference. Then the 5th prince was captured. Anella then returned to report she was spotted. That is why we tried to recall the spies we sent there. But before that happened, we suddenly lost contact with our spies. We found out that they were all killed. And now, this. Ilvela complained while rubbing her forehead. Any more of this, and I will not have any face to show our lord. You should calm down, my dear Ilvela. Wrinkles are not good for your face. King Lucerio appeased his 9th queen. He pulled her to his body and made her sit on his lap. He then gently caressed her head. Ilvela did not resist and seemed to be enjoying this show of affection. On the other hand, the other people in the room seemed to be disgruntled about his. However, it was not a new sight for them, and they could only ignore it. Besides, even them, the demons, it was not a good idea to get on the king's bad side. Their relationship with this kingdom was an alliance. Why? Because the playful tyrant was also a powerful being. If not for his existence, taking over this pitiful kingdom would not even pose a challenge. If one was to think, how could this king get away with his crimes? He abducted women and threatened enemies. And yet, he was still living. No one wanted to cross King Lucerio face to face. Those that did had already fallen to ruin just by his prowess alone. Of course, it was not because of war or combat. King Lucerio did not have that physical ability. Instead, he would use his magical prowess to put a peaceful tribe into a nightmare of illusions, killing each other until none was left. King Lucerio might be a lustful king, but he had the power to back it up. Even a lot of demons that knew his power feared him. While Ilvela was enjoying his display of affection, King Lucerio turned to Dregger. Any information about my unfilial son? Unfilial son. The 13th prince, who left the kingdom several decades ago, Tirimalio. Before the ambush on the warriors of the stone fortress commenced, Tyrio sent a message that they found Tirimalio in that place. I'm very sorry, but nothing so far. All the spies had been killed in the previous night, and the new ones we sent had not sent any finds yet. Please wait until midnight as it was when we received their intelligence on schedule. Unless it was an emergency. As that's so, then be sure to give me the information I needed later. The king commanded, and Dregger vowed in response, Yes, your majesty. Then, Ilvela turned to Dregger. Prioritize the information about that 13th prince, but the most urgent is to monitor that demon that disrupted our plans. I have a hunch that all of this that was happening had a connection with him. Yes, Queen Ilvela. Then, dismiss. I still have to play with my dear, here. King Lucario shooed the others away as he pulled Ilvela to her chamber. The nights were always long for this king. As the two left the throne room through the back door, they passed by someone. My dear Lumeria, what are you doing here? King Lucario asked. I'm just taking a walk, Your Majesty, Lumeria respectfully replied. Is that so? Then don't take too long. Staying up late will be bad for your beauty. And with that, Lucario and Ilvela, who did not even greet Lumeria, left. They did not notice how Lumeria was gripping her fist hard. Terimelio, why did you return? She whispered in a voice that only she could hear. She was the former princess of one of the kingdoms of the White Duendes, Lumeria. Now, the 7th queen of this kingdom and the mother of the 13th prince, Terimelio. Terimelio left this place because of various reasons, and she helped him attain his freedom. After years and years that there was no news from him, although she was worried, it was better than being in this place. But now, news about her beloved son suddenly surfaced. She could not help now but worry about his safety. Unfortunately or fortunately, the 13th prince in question was currently roaming their kingdom in incognito. Asterisk. Is this really safe? Terimelio asked Mark while hiding in his pocket. After stealthily leaving the area where the pitiful human slaves were being kept, Mark observed the surroundings and noticed something. Demons, like the spirit races, came in various forms and appearances. There were some that looked like mutated humans with different colored skin. There were also those that appeared to look exactly like humans but with horns and bat wings. Moreover, there were even some that looked like humanoid animals, and even some that did not have a humanoid body at all. Along the streets, Mark even saw a demon that looked nothing else but a talking ball of flames. And thus, Mark had an idea. Mark created a pocket on his armor and made Terimelio hide inside it. And then, they dispelled the illusion that disguised them. Instead, Mark adorned his cloak that was made with miasma and replaced his mask with a more sinister one. Now, he looked like a formless demon taking on a humanoid form. With that appearance, Mark and Terimelio openly entered the streets. And to Terimelio's question, looks like it's fine, Mark replied. The streets had many individuals roaming around. Whether it be demons, the citizens of the kingdom, nighttime did not affect their activities too much. Mark's current appearance would take some attention from people, but none of them even had the slightest urge to approach him. Miasma demons were the worst creatures to deal with, and no one wanted to get in their way if possible. Along with the "get away from me" aura that Mark was exuding, no one bothered him as they strolled across the town. Even so, Mark was already frowning behind his mask. Structural-wise, this place was beautifully made. A town with a Gothic medieval look was definitely interesting to see. However, the problem lay with the inhabitants. A lot of demons had human slaves with them, and to say, all of the slaves were in the same state as the first ones they saw after entering this place. Some were using their slaves as baggage carriers while others as pets. Seeing a good-looking human woman naked and being made to lick a demon's dirty shoe while on all fours was a really uncomfortable scene to see. The woman was even delighted to do this. This woman's mind was already broken to an irrecoverable degree. If this place was already like this, then without a doubt, the demon realm was a representation of hell itself. Are you all right, boss? Terimelio asked as he noticed that Mark was stealthily glancing at human slaves that they passed by. I'm fine. Just point the way where your mother should possibly be. All right. My mother's chambers are on the east side of the castle. Unless they changed it, it should be there. Mark then followed Terimelio's directions. But of course, saying that he was fine was a lie. He was not really affected by the pitiful fates of these humans, but their negative emotions were flooding into his head constantly. His head was throbbing from time to time. All he wanted now was to finish their goal here as soon as possible. Day 52 p.m. Central Area, Kingdom of Black Duendes, Spirit Dimension. Looks like it won't be that easy, huh? Mark whispered as they reached the walls that separated the outer and central area of the town. Like most medieval-themed cities, it seemed the current Kingdom of Black Duendes also practiced the separation of people by caste. The lower class lived in the outer areas while the upper class lived at the center. It was already like this in the past. The higher ranks are separated from the common populace, but at least the security is not this tight. Terimelio replied, looking at the guards at the entrance and the ones patrolling outside the central area. The central area was heavily guarded, and Mark's goal, the Spire Tree Castle, was at its center. We have no choice. Hold on tight, Mark said as he made his way to an empty alley, and there, he and Terimelio vanished, turning into a surge of black mist that was moving across the ground. Compared to the outer walls, there were a lot of blind spots on the inner walls due to the different structures built around it. This time, even if more guards were roaming the place, Mark would have enough leeway to sneak through. And as such, he succeeded. Mark's shadow mist movement, being able to slip through tight spaces, became handy. Even if there were some demons around with enhanced eyesight or those that were sensitive to psychic fluctuations, it would be hard to spot Mark through those tight spaces. Unfortunately, Mark could not stop and had to use shadow mist movement repeatedly. There was no way that he would be able to travel the streets in the central area freely. Someone would definitely approach him to ascertain his identity. Thus, from alley to alley, from a roof to another, from wall to wall, Mark traveled repeatedly. He appeared and disappeared without even a second interval. Using this empathic detection, he avoided any possible encounter on the way prematurely. Of course, it took quite a toll on Mark, considering that it had not been long since he absorbed the lightning mental crystal, and he was being affected by the emotions of the suffering slaves. Fortunately, they reached the castle grounds without problems and managed to sneak into an area devoid of people. That gave Mark a short moment to rest as he leaned his back on a wall. You really don't look good, Terimelio said, sensing Mark's condition. I'm fine, Mark replied as he looked at the structure in front of him. Still, this castle is bigger scaled than expected, huh? And that this tree. Mark tapped on a nearby root that was protruding on the castle wall. It thought it should be at least a regular spirit tree, but it's not. No, it's not. It's a magic tree. Magic trees have different kinds and use, but this one is planted by Father to concentrate magical energy in the surroundings around the castle. Terimelio explained. I see. No wonder the magical energy here is thicker than before. Well then, where are we going next? It should be. Terimelio looked around, digging up his memories in the past. But then, never mind, found her. Mark said as he opened his wings, and soaring up before he and Terimelio turned into mist once more. In one of the bedrooms at the northeast chambers of the castle, Lumeria stood in front of the window. The window overlooked the kingdom, but it was not what she was staring at. Her eyes stared blankly at the mountains that surrounded the valley, thinking about her son that she had not met for a long time. Lumeria sighed. I wonder how he is doing now. This was one of the things she frequently did in the past since her son left this accursed place. This time, however, the feeling was several times multiplied after hearing about her son from the mouths of the demons. Lumeria's eyes were blankly staring outside until she noticed some movements in the corner of her eyes. She could not help but step back as she saw a surge of black mist flying towards her window. Thinking that it was an attack and the window would be definitely broken through, Lumeria put her hands in front of her, murmuring a few enigmatic words. And then, a glass-like chime echoed as a barrier of light formed in front of her. It was to protect herself from the mist and the shards of glass that might blast off from the sealed window. But then, to her shock, the mist did not hit the window but seeped into the tiny space that separated it from the wall. Because of her shock and fear, she almost screamed for help. However, the mist flew faster towards her, tearing her barrier apart to her utter disbelief. Before she knew it, a hand had already blocked her mouth, stopping her from calling for help. Don't make any loud noise. We're not here to harm you. The owner of the hand that covered her mouth said. And, of course, Lumeria did not believe the voice. Those words were what every intruder would say before they do something with ill intentions. But then, she froze. Lumeria heard another but a smaller voice behind her that sounded very angry. It was accompanied by several sounds hitting metal with a fist. "Oi! You bastard! Get your hands off my mother!" That voice was awfully familiar to Lumeria. And then, "Ouch! Why did you flick me?" the familiar voice complained. "Shout louder that the whole castle can hear you. Let's see what you will do," the first voice said, making the familiar voice lower. Still, "Let go of my mother." Lumeria's heart was pumping loudly at this moment. The familiar voice had called her mother twice already. She would be an idiot if she did not understand what it implied. However, she was also a bit doubtful. It was because there was an aura of a demon behind her. This might be a ploy of the demons to fool her. Then, the voice of the man blocking her mouth spoke to her once more. "I'm going to release you. Don't make any loud sounds." It was not a question but a command. The man holding her did not even wait for confirmation and released her. Being released, Lumeria immediately took several steps away from the intruders and leaned her back to the window. If it was a ploy aimed at her, she would jump out without hesitation. But then, what she saw after turning around was a man that looked human, except for his sinister-looking armor. On the chest of his armor, there was an out-of-place metal pocket could be seen with someone small poking his head outside. Seeing that small person, however, she could not believe her eyes. My son, is that you?" Lumeria could not help but step forward with her hands in front of her. However, she stopped as the intruders might just be trying to fool her. Black duendes were masters of trickery and illusion, after all. "Mother," the man inside the metal pocket voiced out as he jumped out. His visage then blurred mid his fall before he turned into a human-sized person. Seeing that appearance, Lumeria did not know what to do or what to believe. This man in front of her seemed older, but he definitely looked like her son, Terimelio. And then, with one knee on the floor, the man in front of her kneeled towards her. "Mother, I came back." Seeing this, Lumeria was already on the verge of tears. They were the son and daughters of an arrogant king. The princes and princesses of this kingdom were not allowed to vow to anyone. That was one of the reasons the older princes bullied their younger siblings and humiliated them in this way. Terimelio, however, was different. He was humbly raised by Lumeria's influence, making him better than most of his siblings in terms of conduct. And because of that, while Terimelio would not kneel to anyone, he would do it to only one person, and that was his mother. Of course, it was a total secret that no one should know. "My son, is this really you?" Lumeria was stuttering. Her beautiful face was filled with disbelief and longing. Slowly, she lowered her body and touched the face of the man kneeling before her, raising his chin to take a better look. The man did not resist and hardened his expression. His eyes were already moist, though. Feeling his face and seeing it up close, Lumeria affirmed that it was not an illusion. With shaking hands, she slowly grabbed Terimelio's shoulders and pulled him to her embrace. No words followed as Lumeria's tears flowed out of her eyes. Terimelio did not say anything either while he felt the warm embrace of his beloved mother. While the two were having their dramatic reunion, Mark made his way towards the door. He was monitoring the surroundings, making sure that no one would barge in. Mark then continued to watch the silent reunion of the mother and son that had not met each other for several decades. Moreover, for Terimelio that was living in the mortal world, it might even be more than 100 years already. No words were exchanged by the two as they embraced each other. They longed to see each other too much that no words could represent their emotions. A silent reunion seemed dull. However, at times, it was the most dramatic, especially to those that could understand their pain. This scene, however, made Mark feel a bit of envy somehow. Lumeria and Terimelio were in an embrace for about 5 minutes before recovering. The mother and son were absolutely happy to see each other. However, Lumeria snapped out of happiness quickly. Milio. Why did you return here? It is dangerous. You should go back and escape. They will capture you if they see you here. Lumeria became worried as she remembered the danger that Terimelio would face just by being here. Not only Terimelio was already treated as a traitor, but the third queen, Tyrio's mother, was very angry about the capture of her beloved son. In fact, the soldiers that accompanied Tyrio at that time and fled were publicly executed the moment they returned. If anyone were to find Terimelio here, he would be captured, or worse, killed on sight. Mother, I won't leave this place without you. We came here to bring you back with us. Terimelio replied resolutely. They were already here, and there was no guarantee that they would be able to do the same next time. That was why he decided to bring his mother away at once. What are you saying? I'm still safe staying here. You should not burden yourself about me and escape as soon as possible. Lumeria worriedly said. However, by Terimelio's expression, he would not budge from his decision. And by this time, a voice chimed in between the two. You two should cut it short and decide. There's a commotion below, and people are gathering. They likely found out that there are intruders in the castle. Terimelio was surprised to hear that. Boss, did someone see us when we entered? I'm sure that no one saw us. But this is a castle. They might have some measures to find out if intruders manage to sneak in. Don't you know about it? Damn it. I don't know anything about that, Terimelio grumbled in frustration. Don't worry. It seems like the soldiers only know that there are intruders, but they don't know where we are. They are all panicking below. At this time, Lumeria was staring at Mark. This person came with her son, and she did not even bother to greet him. More than that, this person seemed to be powerful, even being able to monitor the movements of the people that there was no possible way of doing. My son. Who is he? Finally, Lumeria asked in a low voice. Oh right. Terimelio scratched his head. He is called Mark. I'm currently working under him. He's my boss. And was it not a surprise? Her son was working under a demon. She could not say whether it was a good or bad thing, though. Day. 16 p.m. Spire Tree Castle, Kingdom of Black Duendes, Spirit Dimension. Alarm bells suddenly rang throughout the castle, alerting everyone of an emergency. At this point, there was an uproar in the castle. Most of the soldiers and guards stationed inside its premises were called to assemble in the castle's plaza. A lot of them were still running out of the barracks. They slowly and sloppily gathered into two groups of lines in front of Dreger and another person. It seemed that the training regime of this place was not polished, and the soldiers were not that organized. No, it was not like they were an unorganized army. It was more like it seemed that they were not used to dealing with sudden emergencies inside the castle. Furthermore, the two groups were not organized because of ranks. It was by their races. The soldiers of the Black Duendes were in one group while the demons were in the other. The difference between the two groups was also apparent in their armors. Demons wore heavy and intimidating armors while the Black Duendes were wearing light and classy-looking ones. You imbeciles! How come that all of you are this slow? There's an intruder in the castle, and not all the soldiers are here to receive their orders. Damn it! The man beside Dreger mercilessly berated the sloppy soldiers in front of him. He did not hold back even towards the demons that were already glaring at him. Elio, my soldiers are not for you to insult. Your classy soldiers are much worse, Dreger coldly said, making Elio grit his teeth in annoyance. Even so, this is not good. Dreger then turned to a robed demon soldier that had arrived. Unlike the other soldiers that came from the barracks, it seemed that this one came from another place. Ulfur, did you find any other traces? No, sire, unfortunately. The trace left in the barrier is too small, as if it was just a ball. If not for the ripples I felt from it, no one would immediately notice that something went through. There was also a pair of footmarks left beside a part of a wall. However, it was too light for us to recognize, and there are no traces left after that. TCH. How useless. Dreger grumbled. It seems like the intruders are skilled. And here we are, still waiting for these imbeciles to gather. Elio added to the side. Without any other choice, the two generals dispatched the soldiers that were already gathered. Waiting for everyone was a waste of time, and they immediately needed to start the search for the intruder. The soldiers searched for the intruder, while on the other hand, the two generals, Elio and Dreger, went to report to their king about the situation. Asterisk 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 inside Lumeria's room, a bit of silence ensued. Lumeria was staring at Mark, observing him due to Teremalio's introduction. The latter, however, only half paid attention to her while sensing the situation around the castle. A few seconds later, Mark broke the silence with a skeptical expression. Are the soldiers in this castle a bunch of clowns? Mark could not help but say that as he sensed the unorganized search happening inside the castle. Those words from Mark, however, made Lumeria show a complicated expression. It's better if you two leave already. You might be laughing at the soldiers' incompetence, but it is because they are mostly for display. Lucerio is the owner of this castle. Someone powerful like him doesn't need any kind of protection from others. Mark looked at Lumeria and could not help but agree with her words. In fact, he could already sense Teremalio's father ever since they entered the castle. Someone with that strong presence was a person that was impossible to ignore. No, mother. Teremalio shook his head as he grabbed his mother's hands. We're here to pick you up. We won't leave this place without you. Seeing Teremalio's resolute expression made Lumeria touched. But then, Oi, don't drag me with you. Even if you two won't go, I would. Mark just had to destroy the atmosphere. Hey, don't look at me like that, Mark added as the mother and son looked at him, annoyed. In any case, Lumeria, right? You better go with your son already. The more you hesitate, the more you are putting him in danger. You understand that, right? Those words from Mark hit Lumeria quite hard. She worried about her son's safety. But at this point, it was she who was putting her son in more danger. Lumeria then took a deep breath. It might be dangerous, but it was also her first and only chance to leave this forsaken place. All right, I will go with you. Lumeria tightened her grip on Teremalio's hand. But promise me that if you need to leave me behind, don't hesitate to do so. At those words, Teremalio smiled with a shake of his head. Sorry, mother. I can't promise that. Mother, it had been a long time, so you might have forgotten already. Teremalio smiled. But you have a hard-headed son. Lumeria shook her head with a sigh, unable to refute her son. And there, Lumeria hurriedly packed up a few things and decided to leave together with Teremalio and Mark. The pair of mother and son being duendes became very convenient at this point. The two reduced to their original sizes and managed to ride onto the pocket that Mark made on his armor. You two hold on tight. Don't bite your tongues. Mark warned the two as he covered himself with a cloak of miasma once again. Still, while Mark looked calm, he was actually quite annoyed about the situation. The whole castle was being searched by the soldiers, and it would be hard to sneak out without getting detected. Mark moved towards the window to look outside, and now, he could not help but notice the barrier that was now covering the entire castle. Lumeria. Is that barrier always there? Mark whispered to Lumeria. It's always there. But it is hidden with illusion magic, and that is why it's not detectable in normal circumstances. But it's not really for protection but detection. That is why I am quite surprised that you and Milio managed to find me without getting detected immediately. Then why is it visible now? Mark asked once more. They might have increased the function of the barrier to ensure that they will detect it if you tried to escape. Mark now realized where he messed up. However, that did not matter now. He just needed to find a way to leave this place. Mark then noticed. The soldiers were already searching in this area of the castle, and because of that, the only way out would be the very same window that they entered earlier. Without any other choice, Mark turned into a surge of black mist that seeped out of the window. With his shadow mist form, Mark flew towards the hidden part of the roof above Lumeria's room. It was because he had an idea. Mark opened his palm, creating a ball made of blood metal. With a smile, he encased the ball with miasma. And with a baseball pitch, he threw the miasma-covered metal ball through the barrier. He did not hesitate to use a bit of adrenaline in that throw, ensuring that it would fly far away. And then, Mark hid by the roof. There, the intruder went that way. Those enraged shouts echoed as the barrier reacted to the metal ball that Mark threw out. Ripples appeared on the barrier as if it was water. The center of the vibration pinpointed where the metal ball went out at its center. And there, Mark saw flying demons chase towards the south, where Mark threw the ball. With the metal ball as bait, Mark then flew in the opposite direction. The majority of the soldiers were now searching where the metal ball landed. That was when Ulfur, the demon monitoring the barrier, detected another fluctuation that escaped the barrier. Unfortunately for Ulfur, the soldiers that could fly were already searching at the south. There was no one that would be able to chase in the opposite direction. Mark continued to appear and disappear, reaching the outer area as fast as possible. He thought that they would be able to escape now without problems. But then, Mark could not help but stop midair. It was because Mark could not see the surroundings anymore. All of a sudden, everything was covered with thick fog. That was when Mark detected a presence approaching them at fast speed. It was the presence of someone he did not want to encounter at all. "Where do you think you are going to take my dear Lumeria?" A chilling voice echoed as a figure appeared in front of Mark amidst the thick fog. Without a doubt, it was Lucerio. Even without wings, Lucerio was floating midair, standing steadily without anything to step on. Lumeria could not help but shiver inside Mark's pocket. Even though the wording was quite light, she was sure that Lucerio was very angry at this moment. But then, Mark sneered. "Terimelio, your father really is a master of illusions." Both Terimelio and Lumeria were both surprised as Mark complimented Lucerio's ability. It was quite sudden and felt unnecessary. But then, they realized why Mark said that. "How unexpected, you noticed." Lucerio said, looking straight at Mark. "Sorry, but some illusion won't be able to stop us," Mark said as he charged through Lucerio's body, passing through it like a ghost. And to say, Mark had quite a cold sweat there for a second. Lucerio was definitely a master of illusion. Even the presence was there. Unfortunately, for the king, however, Mark was unable to detect any emotional fluctuations from the illusion. It was really strange considering how he showed his expressions and anger. Leaving the illusion of Lucerio behind, Mark flew straight without changing directions. However, he was still unable to see the surroundings because of the fog that without a doubt, Lucerio's doing. The fog was not an illusion as Mark could wave through it. It seemed that the King of Black Duendes had other abilities in his arsenal aside from his illusions. Mark flew straight as fast as he could. However, he could not tell where he was using his eyes. All he and the two duendes inside his pocket could see was the thick fog everywhere. But then, Mark could not help but stop. It was because he felt something familiar as his head started aching once more. "Why did you stop?" Terimelio asked. "We fell into another illusion," Mark grumbled in an annoyed tone. "Even if I continue flying, we'll just fly in circles." Terimelio was surprised while Lumeria was really worried. And how did Mark notice? Right at this moment, Mark could feel the emotional fluctuation of the slaves that they saw when they sneaked inside this place. Mark flew towards the north after exiting the barrier. However, the slaves were in the southern part of the valley. Without realizing it, Mark already flew half a circle around the valley, arriving at the starting point of their infiltration. "It seemed that you were skilled." The chilling voice of Lucerio echoed into their ears as another of his illusions appeared before them. "You realized it without even making a whole lap around my kingdom. I can commend you for that. I am tempted to recruit you into my ranks. However, you dared intrude into my castle and take away my dear Lumeria. I will need you to die at this moment." Just as Lucerio spoke those words, the fog started to lighten. Mark, on the other hand, drew Ignis from his sheath. The fog disappeared and around Mark, there were already about 100 winged demons surrounding him and countless soldiers waiting on the ground. Day 26 p.m. Outer area, Kingdom of Black Duendes, Spirit Dimension. Looking at his surroundings, Mark could not help but frown. Lucario having the title of a king and being the strongest among the Black Duendes was well deserved. Mark had not met him face to face, but it was, without a doubt, his magic that led Mark to this situation. Making images appear from thin air, dulling their sense of direction, and even obscuring the presence of the soldiers, they had been affected by several of Lucario's illusions in a short period. The only different one was the fog, as it was not an illusion but an actual thing. Still, the ability to conjure fog and make it disappear quickly was another feat itself. Fortunately, Mark was not entirely oblivious to the illusions. He noticed that he had already gone half a lap across the town and stopped. He also detected the flying demons before they got too close. The fog only vanished because the soldiers that hid inside it already got detected, and a surprise attack was already impossible to achieve. In that case, even to the demons, the fog would end up obscuring their sight. At this point, Mark could only flap his wings, waiting for the right time to attack. Mark took a deep breath, and his frown eased. His grip on Ignis tightened as his eagerness for battle heightened. Mark observed the winged demons that surrounded him. They were different from the ones at the castle. These soldiers seemed to be experienced in dealing with these kinds of situations. Now, it made sense how they suddenly got surrounded. These demon soldiers were from the military barracks outside the town. They all got ready because of the alarm and rushed in at once after locating the intruder. Nevertheless, none of them moved blindly to attack Mark. Both sides were observing each other. These demons were not careless to charge at the enemy they knew nothing about. Furthermore, they had to make sure of one thing. Lucario must not be harmed at any cost. In this moment of stalemate, someone arrived. It was the lizard demon, General Dreger, together with 4 other people. Unexpectedly, 2 were familiar to Mark. One was one of the 2 demons that led the ambush on the warriors of the stone fortress, the bladed demon. The other was the spy that Mark detected first and let go. Both of the 2 were riding on a large bat-like creature. "Release Queen Lucario at once and we will give you a painless death." Dreger, who shouted those words, pointed his sword at Mark as he flapped his green-scaled wings. Of course, they were not here for negotiation. That was a threat towards Mark. And this time, Mark started to move. "Hold on tight." He whispered to Terimelio and Lucario. Mark took everyone by surprise as he charged towards Dreger without any sign of hesitation. However, surprised they might be, but it did not hinder their assessment of the situation. Given that Lucario might accidentally get harmed if they all charged towards Mark, only the group of Dreger prepared to engage. Being Mark's target, Dreger readied himself to defend and counterattack. Behind him, the other 4 high demons aimed to support. Unfortunately for the demons, the places they could attack in Mark's body was limited due to his body being covered with a cloak of miasma. They could only aim for physical attacks as magical ones had a low chance of doing harm and had a chance of harming Lucario instead. Fortunately, they knew where Lucario was being kept in his body. That was why they knew where they would aim their attacks. Clang! Ignis and Dreger's sword, which was as thick as a machete and was shaped like a half-meter-long cleaver, clashed with a loud sound. At that clash, a shockwave pushed everyone back aside from Mark and Dreger. Dreger could not help but grunt as he witnessed something unexpected. Comparing the 2 weapons by size, his was a finger while Mark's was a toothpick. It was expected that the odd but thin sword would break when the 2 clashed. However, not only Ignis held on. Dreger's large blade was chipped. Still, it was not enough for Dreger to stop his movements. His counterattack came as he twisted his blade, making Ignis stuck at the chip before waving his blade backward. The sword in the enemy's hand was thrown away because of the force to the demon's delight. But then, a death cry was heard from behind Dreger. They could not help but look behind, and to the demon's shock, the bladed demon's heart was impaled by the sword that got thrown behind Dreger. As his life started to get snuffed out, he fell from the creature he was riding on. No one could believe this sight. Mark, on the other hand, smirked under his mask. It was according to his plan. Even if Dreger did not make that move, he would feign losing grip of Ignis after a few swings. After all, it was not Dreger who was his actual target but that troublesome bladed demon. It was better to get rid of him immediately as he had a highly sensitive intuition. And for sure, even his intuition did not expect Ignis to fly towards him and pierce his heart after being thrown away by Dreger. Everyone's eyes were on that dying demon. That lapse of their attention gave Mark an opportunity. A black hole appeared before Mark as he took out the slicer and divider from it before charging towards Dreger with the two whip blades. It was a bad match-up for Dreger as his large blade could not keep up with the fast-moving blades. "All of you, attack!" Dreger shouted furiously as the enemy before him pushed him back relentlessly. And with that command, the demons were delighted. They did not care about Lumeria's well-being any longer. Blood rushed to their heads as they saw one of their comrades die for no reason. Suddenly, everything became chaotic. Mark could not help but smile. Chaos was what he wanted to happen. What was more was that he had not used his emphatic abilities yet to start this riot. Magic attacks flew towards Mark. However, most of them vanished upon contact with his cloak. Nevertheless, there were still magical attacks that were needed to watch out for. It was the magical attacks with physical properties like stone bullets and ice spears that were also flying towards him. In any case, Mark did not plan on getting hit by those. Timing the collision of the magic attacks fired at him, Mark vanished. The explosions in the air obscured everyone's sight as he turned into a surge of black mist. He then appeared behind the nearest demon, as the slicer sliced off the demon's neck like tofu. Blood spurted like a fountain as the head and body of that demon got separated. Black blood rained towards the ground as the demon's dead body fell. That was only the start, however. Mark appeared and disappeared in different places. Every time he appeared, a demon's head would fly off, separated from their bodies. Seeing this spectacle, Dreger was growing more and more furious. He could not understand what was going on. The enemy was only a single person. How come that they were having a hard time taking him down? They could not even touch a hair from him, but they were steadily losing people. Dreger looked behind him. "Duala, Volor. Take the enemy down." The demon called Duala glared at Dreger. His pet just died today because of this idiot's orders. And now, this humanoid lizard was ordering him again. "Don't wanna," Duala said, disregarding their general's orders. "Duala." Volor called out to his friend. Insubordination was one of the things that had heavy punishment in the demon military. However, Duala was not fazed at all. "As if I will care for this thing. I had nothing to do with this unless someone is going to give me another pet." Volor could not help but sigh. Duala's ability was quite unique, but he had a very childish personality. "TCH. Dreger clicked his tongue. "I'll find you another one later. Just do your job properly." Hearing that, Duala's eyes lit up. "You better not forget what you said, or the next target of my magic will be you whether you are my superior or not." Volor ignored the two and started to attack the enemy. With a wave of his hand, several magic circles appeared in front of him. From each magic circle, a living chain was summoned. Each chain shot forwards towards the target, moving like homing missiles. On the other hand, Duala also joined in. He started waving his hand in front of him with his index finger extended out. It was clear that he was writing something in the air. As he finished the strokes of his hand, ancient letters glowed in front of him. "Curse of ill fate." Duala shouted as the ancient letters crumbled in front of him. Some sort of invisible energy was released from the ancient letters and flew towards the target. Mark continued with the one-sided battle. Yes, having more people in a battle was an advantage. However, it would only be applicable if the quality of the soldiers were the same. Here, however, Mark was obviously superior to most of the enemies. His skill set was also their bane. For Mark, there were many enemies to kill while the other side only had one. It gave him more advantage as he could move quickly from place to place, destroying the enemy's formation and defense. But then, Mark felt some danger as the clanging of chains entered his ears. About a dozen chains were already flying towards him. It was evident that the goal was to restrain him. Mark maneuvered, evading the chains, but they were too persistent. However, this also gave Mark another advantage over the enemy army. The chains were chasing him and did not care whether there were other obstacles on their paths. And there, the chains ended up blocking or hitting the other demons, making it easier for him to eliminate them. Volor was shocked as his chains were used by the enemy in this manner. It was hateful but also amazing. Still, there was something strange. Duala, you already casted your curse, right? Volor asked Duala only to see him frowning. My curse is ineffective, Duala replied with his hands shaking. You remember, right, Volor? My unique ability is to alter fate, forcing bad luck and misfortune. But our enemy, he's someone without fate. A being without fate. Someone detached from destiny. Volor could not help but slowly retreat as he came to a realization. Without hesitation, he grabbed Duala and started to fly away. Because of this, his chains disintegrated without achieving any goals at all. You bastards! Where are you going? Dregger shouted in anger as he saw the two demons flying away. If you want to die, then don't drag us with you, idiot. Those were Volor's final words as he took Duala away to escape. General, the situation is not in our favor. The intruder is too strong. The female spy that was the only person left in Dregger's group spoke. Also, by the looks of it, your order angered the king of Black Duendes. He is not helping us at all. Her words made Dregger realize. There was no support coming from Lucario. There was no way that the king of Black Duendes could not see what was happening. In this case, the female spy was spot on. Lucario was angry about the demon's careless actions. The main goal for intercepting the intruder was Lumeria's safety. However, the demons disregarded it. And thus, the king stood at the highest balcony of his castle, watching the demise of the demons in the sky. Beside him, Ilvela could only shake her head. She wanted to appeal for Lucario to aid them, but because of their actions, it was unlikely. Now, she could only wait as to when the playful tyrant would step into battle. Day 37 p.m. Spire Tree Castle, Kingdom of Black Duendes, Spirit Dimension. The battle between the intruder and the demons were entirely one-sided. Everyone in the town was now paying attention, and they all could see how the dead bodies of winged demons fall from the sky one by one. Everyone under the area of the battle fled far as blood and body parts rained from above. A lot of decapitated heads crash on the roofs far from their bodies. Sometimes, it would be sliced off wings, at times, limbs. In the worst scenes, internal organs as they fell out of bodies sliced in half. Imagine a body that was cut on its abdomen, flipping in the air as it fell from the sky, splattering its intestines everywhere. It was definitely not a pleasant sight. It was still better for the bodies that turned to dust after hitting the ground. However, not every demon had a body that was made of magical energy, especially those with mixed bloodlines. And thus, those dead bodies were left on the streets, the roofs of the houses, and even on people. At this unpleasant sight, however, a certain class of people was delighted. It was the human slaves. The duendes were known to take humans away from the mortal world. However, it was limited to either those that they liked or those that offended them. However, due to the influence of the demons, slavery of humans and other races became common in this place. It caused some of the unexplainable missing cases of people from the past until the present. It was all because of these accursed demons. Even now, most of the operations involving slavery in this place were supervised by these demons. The slaves' pain, ill treatment, and broken minds were all because of these demons. And now, they were all watching the battle in the sky with their lifeless eyes. They did not know who their enemy was. They were not making any unnecessary noise out of fear. However, they all rooted for the being that was killing all those demons. Kill them all! Kill them all! Their hearts shouted. Unfortunately, their minds had been deeply scarred that their bodies remained unmoved. Asterisk 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 at the highest balcony of the Spire Tree Castle, Lucario was smiling at the sight of the demons falling from the sky. That smile, however, made Ilvela very uncomfortable. Your Majesty, shouldn't we need to help them? Ilvela could not hold it anymore and asked Lucario. Those demons, after all, was their soldiers. Furthermore, she was a demon herself. Lucario glanced at her and spoke. My dear Ilvela, do you remember the orders I gave them? Safely secure Lumeria and kill the intruder. Ilvela replied without any hesitation. She remembered the orders clearly as she was together with Lucario in her chambers when Dregger received the orders. You remembered my exact words. Lucario nodded and turned his head back to the ongoing battle. Then tell me, is there any sign of them following the orders I gave? Ilvela could not reply. There was no way to defend the demon soldiers. The way they attacked relentlessly and fired off their magic towards the intruder was not safe at all. If the enemy was any weaker, those attacks were enough to harm Lumeria. The only thing in their mind at this point was to kill the intruder. I don't need soldiers that did not know how to follow orders correctly. Lucario continued. This is a good opportunity to get rid of them without dirtying my hands. Lucario's eyes then fell on the only demon that was not doing anything in the battle, taking command of his subordinates. Especially that Dregger. He is being too ambitious as of late. I just gave him a bit of freedom to act, but he had already done many things to hinder the competency of his peers while being incompetent himself. It was his idea to relocate the nest of Delim's pet spider, and now, it is dead. I would have turned a blind eye on that if he showed any value. But with his current display, I better choose a new general to manage the demon soldiers soon. Those were some harsh words from the heartless king. He might have worded it differently, but those words had already put Dregger and his subordinates onto the execution block. Lucario just declared that they better died here. That, however, did not sit well with Ilvela. But your Majesty, won't their deaths anger the Lord? These soldiers were sent by him. Finishing her words, however, Ilvela realized that she messed up. Lucario grabbed her chin as he closed his face to hers. It was not in a romantic way, however, as he was exuding a suffocating killing intent. The playful tyrant was not playing this time. The kind of expression Lucario had made the succubus fear for her life. My dear Ilvela, I value you as one of my queens. You have the beauty, the body, and you are quite obedient. However, it seemed that you have yet to understand who you should please. Lucario then grabbed her waist, pulling her body towards him in a violent manner. The moment I laid my eyes on you, you are mine. That three-headed lord of yours already gave you to me as a tie for the alliance they wanted. You should worry about serving me and not anyone else being something that I own. Do you understand my words? Why yes. My apologies. Ilvela replied, stuttering in fear. Then, good. I will expect more from you. Lucario let go of Ilvela. I really like you, my dear Ilvela. Please don't force me to add another gravestone in the royal burial ground. Ilvela bowed while shaking. The pressure that accompanied Lucario's killing intent was too hard for her to endure. When he mentioned the burial grounds, she became even more afraid. The royal burial grounds was different from the ancestral grounds, where the latter had the empty tombs of former members of the royal family of Black Duendes rested in peace. It was a graveyard that was built under Lucario's orders. In this burial ground laid the gravestones of the women that dared to defy Lucario's orders. The former supposed queens that died by his own hands. Ilvela never wanted to be among those women. It looks like the time for me to step out is coming soon. Lucario said, making Ilvela turn her head towards the battle once more. There, barely around 20 of the winged demons were left, along with the heavily injured Dregger. Mark flapped his wings while smiling under his mask. Around him, only 18.5 demons were left to surround him. Why was there a half? It was because Dregger was there, only left with one arm and one leg. His wings were missing too. He had to rely on the large bat that the female spy was riding on in order to stay on the battlefield. You bastard, you think you already won? Dregger grunted in pain. Splat. Splat. Dregger's wounds made disgusting sounds as his missing limbs and wings suddenly grew back, splattering his greenish-black blood everywhere like a certain green alien species. With his new limbs and wings, Dregger flew once more, returning the number of enemies back to 19. Mark only stared at him incredulously, though. His ability was quite absurd considering that lizards could only regenerate an inferior tail after it was cut off. Well, not like Mark was someone who could complain. Even so, Mark was not really amused. Dregger was the leader of these soldiers, but he was definitely dumb. He could have feigned his injury and let himself fall before regenerating his limbs and make his escape. Instead, however, this lizard demon decided to show off his regeneration to Mark. As if it could change anything, consider that. Slash. Slash. Mark could overwhelm him in terms of speed and slice off his limbs without any effort. Arr! Dregger cried out in pain as he watched his newly grown arm fall to the ground once again. In the least, he retreated from Mark, who appeared behind him. Rargh, Dregger cried out as he regrew his arm. However, it was obvious that every time that he regrew a missing part of his body, it was consuming his energy. He already lost. However, he did not want to admit it, and thus continued to fight, despite their imminent death. It was the same for the remaining demons around Mark. The only exception was the female spy that was already hesitating whether to continue supporting Dregger or flee. Die! Dregger roared, charging towards Mark together with the other demons. But then, they all froze without even closing onto Mark. Dregger, that's enough. Lucerio's voice echoed in everyone's ears. Don't disgrace yourself any further. At this point, a visage of a person suddenly appeared standing in front of Dregger. It was no other than Lucerio himself. Mark stared at this king of black duendes. Different from the illusion that he saw earlier, the king was now wearing a fancy robe with metallic armor-like pieces. This time, Mark was sure that it was not an illusion. Lucerio was here himself, and to say, seeing a duende capable of hovering midair was a bit surreal. Your Majesty, facing Lucerio's back, Dregger tried to reason, however, he was met with his king's glare over his shoulder. I thought of giving you another chance. However, it seemed that you are really unfit to serve me. Your service is not needed any longer. Badump. At Lucerio's glare, Dregger's eyes widened. URK. Dregger tried to resist. However, his right hand started to approach his chest. Splurt. Unable to resist Lucerio's power, Dregger pulled out his own heart. With Lucerio as the last image in his mind, Dregger's lifeless body plummeted to the ground. Everyone that witnessed was surprised, not to mention that almost the entire town was watching. However, the surprise was a bit lackluster that it did not amount to their shock from watching Mark fight 100 demons alone. After all, it was not the first time for them to witness Lucerio killing a subordinate. Just recently, during the time that the infected came into the spirit dimension, one of Lucerio's previous generals made a mistake. It was still not known that the infected could turn others into one of their kind. The general brought back an injured soldier that already got bitten. In the end, that soldier, along with other injured soldiers and civilians in the healing facility, became infected. It caused chaos to the southwest part of the town. The general had to hold responsibility and was executed for incompetence. There were also other cases before. That was why Dregger's death was not that much of a surprise considering what happened. The other demons retreated after Dregger's death. Their general was killed mercilessly, not to mention them, who were mere soldiers. At this point, only Lucerio and Mark were left in the sky of the town. Well, Terimelio and Lumeria were also present, but they were hidden. I commend you for being able to last this long, demon. Now, hand over Lumeria, and I might consider you to replace Dregger as my new general. Lucerio proposed while scrutinizing Mark. But then, the king noticed. Though I am puzzled. How can a miasma demon like you have a physical body to hold a sword or even hide Lumeria inside your body? Mark. who was disguised as a miasma demon, surely intrigued the tyrant king. And to say, he was interested in turning Mark unto his subordinate. To all the king's words, however, no reply came, not a single word. Mark only flapped his wings while observing the king in black duendes in front of him. Not even a sign that he would reply could be seen. This made the king of black duendes frown. Not only Lucario. Even Terimelio and Lumeria were looking at Mark from his pocket, since he was not uttering a single word since earlier. "Boss, have you gone mute? Why are you not replying?" Terimelio whispered, and then, the reply came to Terimelio's question. "What should I reply? I don't understand what they are saying." Terimelio almost fell from Mark's pocket. It was no wonder why Mark was silent until now. He was disguised as a demon and had an aura of a demon. That was why Lucario and Dreger spoke to him in demonic language. And Mark, who grew up in the mortal world, had absolutely no way of understanding their words. Day 47 p.m. Kingdom of Black Duendes, Spirit Dimension. Lucario stared at the intruder in front of him, frowning deeply. Towards his offer, there was no reaction aside from whispering that he could not hear properly. There was, in fact, the feeling that this demon was not paying attention to him at all. And to a king that made his way out to confront an intruder himself, being ignored was an absolute insult. In any circumstance, when a king spoke to a person, not responding in kind was a crime. "Why won't you speak?" Lucario asked, irritated. However, it also seemed that he realized that it was no use talking to this intruder, and instead, "Lumeria, why don't you come out now? Let me bring you back home." He switched his attention to Lumeria, who was hiding on the intruder's body. "I will promise you that nothing will happen to your homeland if you come back to me at this instant." Those words of Lucario made Lumeria's heart falter. Mark, who felt Lumeria's unsteady mind, whispered to Terimelio to translate it for him. Learning the meaning of Lucario's words, Mark whispered to Lumeria, "You don't have to falter. There's no way that I will let you return after we've come this far. I won't let my efforts go wasted. Besides, if you agree to that, you're basically giving up on your son." Lumeria could not help but look up to Mark. He was right. Even if she followed Lucario, Terimelio would be in danger. At this point, Lucario was getting impatient. However, he caught some words from Mark's whispers and realized an odd thing. How come that a demon like you is too fluent in human language? This time, Lucario spoke to Mark without using the demonic language from before. It seemed that he was being suspicious whether Mark was a real demon or not. As Mark finally understood Lucario's words, he could finally reply. "Because I'm not." With those words, Mark was smiling behind his mask. With a flap of his wings, he charged towards the king of black duendes. This took everyone, as in everyone watching, by surprise. Even Lucario did not expect that Mark would suddenly attack in the middle of the conversation. It was what Mark was aiming for at this time. In the first place, there was no need to listen to the words of the enemy from the start. He just had to wait for Lucario to either lower his guard or get preoccupied with thinking about something confusing. Being confused as to why Mark was using human language despite appearing like a demon was a good one. As the opportunity showed itself, Mark charged into attack. Mark's movements were swift and relentless. He appeared in front of Lucario almost instantly and hacked his swords, aiming to split the king's body in half. Both the slicer and divider passed through Lucario's body. Tisk. Mark clicked his tongue. It looks like it won't be easy. Unfortunately, what the swords hacked was nothing but an afterimage. It was one of the abilities inherent to duendes. That absurd movement speed that at its peak could bend light enough for their image to multiply. Lucario might have some delay in his reaction due to the unexpected attack. Still, his speed had compensated for that delay, and managed to dodge. Even so, Mark was no disheartened. He looked at Lucario that was now hovering several meters further away. The front of Lucario's gaudy robe had an X-shaped cut, showing that the king did not entirely avoid his swords. "Why you?" Lucario was utterly furious. Someone with good imagination would be able to see the fumes coming out of his nose and the flames on his eyes. Insolent bastard! The playful tyrant roared in anger. With that roar, an oppressive aura enveloped the surroundings. Terimelio and Lumeria that were inside Mark's pocket felt suffocated. Not only them, but everyone in the kingdom felt the same. And as for Mark, who was the target of that aura, he was frozen still, staring blankly in the void. Ha 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 ha, Lumeria, you better come with me before it's too late. Even if this helper of yours is a miasma demon, he won't be able to do anything against my illusions. Lucario was sure proud of his powers. Physically, black duendes might be inferior to other races. However, pretty much like the white ones, their magical abilities were outstanding. And to deal with miasma demons, illusions were one of the best methods, specifically, an illusion that would manifest the target's inner emotions. Miasma demons had one trait that was inherent to their race. They were emotionally unstable. They easily get riled up as miasma itself was born from negative energies. It would make them seek destruction wherever they go. Using illusions to make their emotions chaotic was to turn their very existence itself unstable. And to Lucario, that very kind of illusion was a piece of cake to pull off. Lumeria and Terimelio became afraid of the situation. If Mark was really affected by that illusion, even if he was not a real miasma demon, his mentality would be severely affected. But then, a voice entered the ears of the two, putting them in utter disbelief. Hey, what is he saying? I can't understand it. Translate it. B-boss. What? Terimelio stuttered. Didn't you get caught in an illusion? You froze just now. Huh? What illusion? Mark was confused. I stopped since I'm waiting for what will happen. But aside from that aura just now, there's nothing. I'm pretty disappointed. Really. Lumeria and Terimelio could not believe what they were hearing. And, of course, Lucario, who was proud of his illusions, was the same. And this time, Mark did not whisper at all. Lucario finally confirmed that Mark was unable to understand demonic language. It was truly strange. Furthermore, another voice was heard by him clearly. You are not a demon, Lucario said, this time in human language. I had just said that I'm not. Have you gone senile? Mark replied in a ridiculing manner as he absorbed the coat of miasma that covered his body. It revealed Mark's appearance, which was, in no doubt, human. He might be wearing a sinister armor and mask. He even had the wings of a bat. However, the skin that was exposed on his neck, and his body shape revealed it all. Human? No, you're not. You have the aura of a demon. And to have the ability to control miasma with a human body. You're an unknown being. Lucario deduced as he raised his cautiousness. To anything and everything in all dimensions, the worst enemy to fight was the unknown. Those words from Lucario made Mark quite surprised. It was unexpected that, for the first time, someone immediately went to the conclusion that he was an unknown being instead of asking what he was. Well, whatever you think doesn't really matter. In the end, I'll have to kill you to prevent more troubles. Mark said, pointing his swords at Lucario. Do you think that being an unknown being gives you what it takes to kill me? The playful tyrant declared. I am Lucario. I am the king of this kingdom. This kingdom will get destroyed first before I fall. But then, Mark replied. Good, that's also my intention. And with those words as the signal, black flames burst out in the streets of the kingdom. Like wildfire, it spread from street to street as if it was being led by something. Ah! Blood-curdling screams of demons and duendes entered their ears as those beings burned to dust in a matter of seconds. And to the humans that were engulfed in flames, they did not even scream. They watched their bodies burn, finally embracing their freedom after death. But while everyone was getting burned by flames, some slaves unexpectedly came out unscathed. They were in shock and relief that they were still alive. And then, the uprising started. One of the slaves that survived found the weapon that his master that had just burned to ashes carried. Even though the slave was emaciated, he picked up the weapon and started to attack the nearest demon to him. That scene made the other slaves do the same. They all found weapons and started the rebellion against the kingdom that enslaved them. On the sky, Lucerio stared at the situation that his kingdom was in. He was in utter disbelief. Roar! At this time, a loud roar echoed as a black dragon came approaching the kingdom. Boss! They are! Terimelio called out, realizing who that roar came from. I called them, Mark replied. I can't fight properly if you two are on my chest. Mark looked at Chaflar that swooped down on the soldiers at the walls, breathing fire on them. But then, Mark's attention suddenly focused on Lucerio. The king of black duendes was staring at Chaflar's direction in utter amazement. Of course, it made Mark frown. Lucerio turned to Mark with a smile. Is that woman yours? I don't care if you take Lumeria or my kingdom. Even my other queens. No, even my daughters. You can do whatever you want to them. Just give that woman to me. Sure enough, this lustful bastard was aiming for May, and by the looks of it, it seemed that Lucerio had a good estimate of May's value, enough that he was willing to give everything he had in exchange for her. I'm not interested, Mark said as he signaled his hand. At this time, Ignis flew back to Mark, after setting the kingdom on fire. It was one of the reasons why he let go of Ignis after killing the bladed demon. It was to cause chaos below. Terimelio, Lumeria. Ride on Ignis first and join the others. I'll deal with things here. Lucerio saw what Mark was doing and his attention was focused on the familiar duende beside Lumeria. The two duendes looked at Mark and Lucerio as they were taken away by Ignis. So, it's actually my unfilial son. It's no wonder why it was Lumeria that was taken away by you. Lucerio then glared at Mark. It doesn't matter. I will take Lumeria back to punish her. I'll also take that woman. Unfortunately, I won't give you any chances, Mark said as he vanished from his initial position. Terimelio and Lumeria were not in his pocket anymore. His movement restrictions had been lifted. Bam! Gah! Lucerio gasped in pain as both of Mark's feet connected with his abdomen in a relentless kick. The kingdom was engulfed in black flames. A dragon was rampaging by the west walls. The whole city was in chaos because of the slaves. And those left watching the scene in the sky saw how their king turned into a meteor that crashed into his castle. This is way better, Mark said as he stretched his body. He was holding back on his speed until now and only relied on his shadow mist movement. It was because there was no way that Terimelio and Lumeria would be able to handle his movements while inside his pocket. Now that the two were brought to safety, he could fight to his heart's content. Well then. Let's activate this too, Mark said as his metal armor started to change shape. Bone-like protrusions fused with his blood metal armor. His wings also changed in appearance and became covered in bone-like armor. His veins then glowed brightly. The light even seeped on the open parts of his armor. And lastly, the wind manipulation mental crystal glowed brightly while floating above his arm. With all the preparations done, Mark flapped his wings hard. Boom! Everyone heard the explosion of air in the sky as they saw space distort due to the shockwave. Mark, who was the cause of that event, could be barely seen, as he charged towards the castle where Lucerio fell. At this time, duendes had already gathered to protect the castle and the royal family. In unison, they chanted, and a barrage of magic flew towards the intruder's direction. Day. 57 p.m. Spire Tree Castle, Kingdom of Black Duendes, Spirit Dimension. Chaos suddenly enveloped the Kingdom of Black Duendes. A flying sword spread black flames that scattered almost everywhere. These flames that could not be extinguished by normal means continued to spread out to anything it touched, flammable or not. It was as if it had a mind of its own as it sought places where most of the demons and duendes concentrated. The slaves that survived the flames escaped from their cages and restraints. Some of them fled, while some aimed for revenge. With their stolen weapons, they charged towards the demons and duendes that was already injured by the black flames. Even so, the demons and duendes still had the advantage. many of the slaves died fighting. However, it did not dissipate their thirst for revenge for their lives that were ruined by these accursed creatures. And the main reason for all of this chaos, Mark, was facing the barrage of magical attacks aimed at him without fear. The army of black duendes stationed at the castle was now in formation. The sudden intrusion might have caught them off guard. The battle between Mark and the demons, however, gave them enough time to prepare for the defensive. And Lucerio's meteoric crash towards the castle prompted everyone to activate all the castle's defenses. The tree that spiraled across the castle started to emit an eerie glow as a magical barrier covered its entirety. It seemed to be a one-sided barrier that prevented anything from entering but not from going out, since the duendes were firing magic from inside without being hindered. Flying at breakneck speed, Mark opposed the magical attacks coming at him. Fireballs, lightning arrows, and even wind blades. It was not surprising that the duendes were able to unleash different kinds of elemental attacks. However, with a wave of Mark's hands, he released a shield of miasma, dissipating the attacks that were entirely made of magical energy. Still, there were some attacks that Mark had to evade. It was the rock bullets and ice spikes that had substance than being purely made of magic. A fire would not burn without fuel. Electricity would scatter without a steady source and a conductor, and the wind would not take shape without a container. The moment that Mark absorbed the magical energy that formed these attacks, the attack itself would dissipate. Stone and ice, however, could hold shape after it was formed. It was a solid substance capable of maintaining it. Magic was only involved in conjuring the projectiles and launching it. After the bullets and spikes were shot, it would not stop even if the magic was gone unless it was destroyed or lost its momentum. Bam! 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 Mark evaded the stone and ice with the flap of his wings. Every change of direction he did would cause a visible ripple in the air as his figure would suddenly shift in different places. "This is pretty hard to control," Mark murmured. Even he was quite surprised as to how each flap of his wings would throw him in a different place mid-flight. Nevertheless, Mark was starting to get the hang of it. In every flap of his wings, his control became better and better. It was until to the point that his movements became controlled in a matter of seconds. Mark waved through and avoided the magical attacks and almost managed to reach the barrier around the castle. It was when a wave of ferocious energy surged towards him. And at this time, Mark noticed the surroundings darken. "That guy won't just give up," Mark grumbled. It was one of Lucerio's illusions. At this time, Mark could not help but change the direction of his flight. It was because all of a sudden, the incoming attacks suddenly multiplied not just twice or thrice, but maybe even 5 times the initial number. However, illusion or not, Mark could not tell. Even for him, trying to figure out which were real or not among the thousands of magical attacks coming to him was impossible. But then, Mark stopped in place. All of a sudden, he was surrounded by magical attacks from all directions. Front, back, above, and below, Mark faced an enclosed wall of a magical barrage. Mark could not see anything else but the attacks that were about to hit him. Furthermore, his sense of direction was obscured once more. In the middle of the illusion, he lost his way once more. What an annoying ability! Asterisk asterisk asterisk. In the castle, everyone watched Mark as he was about to get engulfed by the thousands of magical attacks. Even so, they did not stop. The soldiers continued to fire their magic, making sure that the enemy would have nothing, not even ashes, left. Lucerio, who was now out of the rubble, smiled sinisterly. Without a doubt, there's some of his illusions that could not affect Mark. However, it did not mean that everything he had would not work. And furthermore, the illusion he used just now was not a simple one. It was an illusion that would multiply the magical attacks, and despite being illusions, it would deliver the same effect as the original. This meant that all of the magical attacks the enemy was facing were just as real as they could be. And once Mark was engulfed by it, it would be his death. "Die!" Lucerio roared, releasing anger, but then... Spurt. What? Lucerio coughed out blood as he fell on his knees. not only him but every soldier around him were in the same condition. The worst thing to happen was that Lucerio's sudden state caused his illusion to dissipate before it could even hit the enemy. It was when they noticed Mark, looking at them from above, with his eyes glowing red and releasing sparks of electricity. Without any magical attack to hinder him, Mark flew towards the barrier. Crash! The barrier crumbled to nothingness with a fist from Mark that was covered in miasma. And there, he landed in the middle of the soldiers that were all unable to stand up. All of them had their eyes, nose, and ears were profusely bleeding as they clutched their heads in unbearable pain. Some even died in the spot, turning to dust as they could not withstand the suffering they were currently feeling. Of course, they would not be able to. What these people were feeling right now was the pent-up suffering from the slaves that Mark had been absorbing since he entered this place. Gacch. Lucerio coughed out a mouthful of blood while Mark approached him. What did you do? It was unexpected for everyone. Mark was about to die just now, but the battle suddenly reversed in an instant. Protect His Majesty! Shouts suddenly came from the castle as more people came out to protect their king. It was a group of 10 heavily armed duendes. Mark could not help but turn his head towards the leader of the new group. Unexpectedly, it was definitely one of the princes as he had a similar mental fluctuation to Lucerio. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. Mark shrugged as his figure flashes towards the prince and his group. The group then froze on their steps as Mark appeared behind them. Just how stupid can you guys get? Mark asked. You guys shouldn't have come out and hid instead. As Mark finished those words, that prince's group all fell down to the ground before turning to dust. Mark then raised his arm towards the disintegrating bodies, absorbing their precious energies. Furio! A woman's cry was heard as she rushed towards the ash of the prince. Without a doubt, this woman was one of Lucerio's queens. Grabbing the ashes with her eyes brimming with tears, the woman turned to Mark in hatred. Die! She shrieked as her voice caused the surroundings to rumble. Even Mark could not help but wince in pain as her voice entered his ears. Stupid! Mark grumbled as his figure flashed. The woman's shriek turned to croaks as her head separated from her neck. Really stupid! Mark ridiculed as he absorbed the woman's energy into the psi crystal. Everyone that was still alive stared in disbelief. Mark, without hesitation, killed a prince and a queen of their kingdom. Marina! Furio! Lucerio roared as he saw one of his queens die pitifully. Can you not act like that? Mark said as he approached Lucerio once more. It makes me feel like I'm the villain here. Why you? Lucerio was speechless, but before he could say more, he was picked up by Mark. You don't have to worry. You will join your people soon. Of course, after I kill the others. Mark said as he waved his free hand. Miasma enveloped the surroundings, killing all the soldiers still alive. Their blood-curdling cries echoed across the castle as their bodies turned to dust slowly. Unfortunately for them, none of the soldiers present in this part of the castle walls could move at all and could only helplessly watch their comrades die before they followed. TCH. You bastard! Lucerio roared, trying to resist Mark's psychic attack. If this battle happened before Mark stepped into this kingdom, with Lucerio's mental strength and abilities, he would be able to resist it. Unfortunately, there was no way for him to resist the accumulated negative emotions of the slaves that made even Mark kneel. You can only blame yourself, you know that, Mark sneered. If you just let us leave from the start and did not insist on taking back Lumeria, this would not have happened. And even with that, I might just have ended up killing you. Mark then threw Lucerio to the ground and stepped on his head. But no, I don't know how you knew that May is my woman. It is your mistake for targeting my precious wife. You said it, right? The things you wanted to exchange for her. Then, what about I destroy all of those? I'll make sure that you will have nothing else left before I kill you. Lucerio stared at Mark. Although he had a mask on, Lucerio felt like he was looking at a devil. For the first time in several hundred years, Lucerio felt fear. At this time, loud flaps of wings were heard. Mark looked above and saw Chaflar flying towards the castle. The dragon then landed, blowing away the ashes of the duendes left in the surroundings. Gurgur. May jumped down from Chaflar together with the others. It was the same for Lumeria and Terimelio, who turned back to their human sizes. Lucerio looked at May. He was still mesmerized by her appearance, despite his current situation and the pain he was feeling. That gesture, however, made Mark strengthen the concentration of negative energy into Lucerio's mind, causing him to wail in pain. It was when Lucerio's eyes fell on Lumeria. "Lumeria, help me. I loved you." However, Lumeria just shook her head. "My apologies, but I never did. I gave you a lot of things before. I never wanted those things. What I wanted is my freedom. I begged you countless times." Lumeria shouted from the bottom of her heart. "I had to keep up with your nonsense and live in fear. Do you really think that I will help you? Mother, calm down. From today on, you will be free from this bastard." Terimelio tried to calm his mother. Lucerio wanted to speak more, and it was obvious that he wanted to curse Terimelio. After all, it was obvious that he was the one that brought Mark here to get Lumeria. However, no more words came from Lucerio. Mark had already covered his mouth with a jaw cover made of blood metal, disabling him from moving his mouth. "No more nonsense. I still have to eliminate everyone else." Mark's words, however, made Lumeria grab onto his arm, stopping him. "What now?" Mark asked, frowning at Lumeria. "I have a request." Lumeria replied. Day. 11 a.m. Spire Tree Castle, Kingdom of Black Duendes, Spirit Dimension. Everyone's attention now focused on Lumeria. She did not notice it, though, as her attention was entirely on Mark. Lumeria was hesitating whether she should continue or forget what she wanted to say. In the start, although she was amazed that Mark managed to bring Terimelio and find her in the castle, she was skeptical whether they would be able to escape at all. However, she was wrong. Alone, Mark defeated both the army of demons and black duendes, and now, Lucerio's life was literally in his hand. It was unbelievable. Because of these thoughts, she wondered if she deserved to ask him a request at all. However, by Mark's actions and words, it was clear that he wanted to eradicate every living being in this castle, and probably the whole kingdom. And a kind-hearted white duende like her would not want such a thing to happen. Without a doubt, this kingdom was inhabited by corrupt, evil, and malicious beings. In fact, the majority of the people in this kingdom was raised and living that way. Proud and arrogant, while looking down on other races and enslaving them. However, not everyone was like that. Some were victims too. And in this circumstance, can you please spare the other queens? Everyone was not surprised. Mark and the others already expected that she would ask of this. What was surprising was that she specifically asked for the queens only. It meant that the princes and princesses were actually not included in her plea. Of course, Lucerio glared at Lumeria with eyes filled with hate. He was already done for. Even if he wanted to deny it, there was no hope for him, and Lumeria's request was basically cutting off Lucerio's lineage, only leaving Terimelio, who he had the least influence with. Lucerio wanted to curse Lumeria. It was just he was not able to as Mark tightened his grip on the king's neck before he could let out a single letter. Just the queens? What about Terimelio's half-siblings? Mark asked for confirmation. Yes, Lumeria replied. Among us, only 2 are willing to be with his ma ahem. Lucerio. The others were only forced by the circumstances. About the princes and princesses, I don't know. Lumeria sighed as she glanced at Lucerio. I want to save them too, but his influence on them is too deep. I'm afraid that it's too late for them to change. Leaving them alone might create another tyrant in the future. That was Lumeria's fear. The birth of another tyrant that would oppress other races. After all, they were Lucerio's children. They inherited his abilities that could possibly grow stronger in the future. And unfortunately, unlike her, the other queens did not care for their children, making them hate their mothers. It was not a surprising situation considering that they were children of an unwanted relationship. Not to mention that compared to humans, relationships between spirit races were far feebler. That situation, however, made the influence of Lucario towards his children far greater. On the other hand, Torimelio, who had a kind mother, was both fortunate and unfortunate. He did not become like his siblings. T's situation, however, gained the ire of his siblings due to both Lucario's influence and their jealousy. The only exceptions were the first and third princes that were born under the same mother and the fourth princess. These three were children of the two queens that followed Lucario wholeheartedly. Thus, they were not jealous of Torimelio but only loved to make fun of and bully their siblings. Not only Torimelio but also others. And to Lumeria's request. Well then. Mark smiled. His smile, however, made the others uneasy. What can you give me in exchange for their lives? Hey, of course, it was Torimelio who was the first to react. Pephile on the side shrugged with a sigh while the others shook their heads slightly. Mark was Mark, especially in these kinds of situations. Lumeria could only look at Mark incredulously. She was speechless and did not know what response she should give. There was one thing that she was sure of, however, it was that Mark's glowing eyes were not joking. In the first place, it was easier to kill everyone in the castle in one sweep by how Mark handled the black duendes. And to fulfill her request, it would take more effort, especially now that the members of the royal family of black duendes and the other officials might already be hiding in their secret passages. Unfortunately, Lumeria had nothing to give at this moment. Well, aside from one thing. Then, Lumeria replied. However, no, mother, you don't have to say anything. Torimelio cut her off and turned to Mark. Boss, don't be like this. To Torimelio's gestures, Mark rolled his eyes. Just what are you getting riled up about? I just want your mother to work under me, pretty much like you. It's not anything bad, right? Ha. Torimelio could not help but feel helpless. There was no way he could refute that. It was not bad. In fact, it was too good. Every time that they were with Mark, he was more or less babysitting them. Of course, when it came to working, they could not slack. Still, Torimelio wanted to complain about how Mark would always do this kind of thing during times when the other party had no way to refuse. He had already done this several times in the stone fortress, after all. Hearing the conversation between her son and his boss, Lumeria could not help but smile. Milio, don't worry. If it's just working, I don't mind. Lumeria grabbed her son's arm and pulled him to her side. This is much better as a change. Try comparing it to how I had been imprisoned in this castle for several decades. Lumeria said all that, looking at the accursed castle in front of her. Mother. Torimelio sighed with a smile. All right. Finally, Lumeria agreed to Mark's conditions. As long as he spared the other queens, she would be working under him together with her son. Well, then. Mark looked at Lucario. Since I don't have to kill the remaining queens anymore, I have no need for this guy. And these words were the playful tyrant's death sentence. Arrrrhhh. Lucario's eyes widened as he screamed out loud. Fear, indignance, pain. His face twisted with different expressions as Mark started to erase his existence. The king still tried to resist as he tried to create illusions. However, his last-ditch effort amounted to nothing as Mark riled up his subconscious. Amidst his roars, Lucario turned to dust in Mark's hands. At the same time, Mark smiled as the psi crystal on his arm glowed brightly. And there, a crystal appeared on Mark's hand. What a pity, it's just an attributed crystal. Mark examined the large marble-sized crystal between his fingers. It was a crystal with a foggy gray color. There was no glowing orb inside, which meant that it was a crystal similar to those that Mark gathered before from the infected spirit races. Still, this crystal was larger in size and had higher potency than the others. Here, Mark said as he carelessly threw the crystal towards Torimelio. Caught by surprise, Torimelio almost dropped it. This, boss? Torimelio was confused as to why Mark gave it to him. Don't tell me that you forgot what that is. No, I definitely remember. But, Are you really giving this to me? Terimelio could not believe it. It was the first time that he received one from Mark, after all. He had seen Amihan, Aphelia, and Spera absorb a crystal before and strengthening their powers. However, they were Mark's direct subordinates. The people that were devoted to serving him. Stop asking questions if you don't want me to take that back, Mark said as he turned around to enter the castle. And to say, Terimelio was happy. Not only he reunited with his mother, and the threat of the black duendes was almost over, he even received a crystal from Mark. As he looked at the crystal, Terimelio wholeheartedly pledged to meet Mark's expectations. Mark did not know this, but to everyone in the base, receiving a crystal from Mark was a sign of recognition. And here, Terimelio's wives swarmed towards him, happy at his current achievement. Though, it seemed like Lumeria was quite troubled by this. Not by the crystal, of course, as she did not know about it. What troubled her was the totally unexpected number of wives that her son had. Furthermore, all of them came from different races. However, she understood that it was different from Lucerio and the queens he gathered by force. All of her son's wives looked happy and free. Mark's group entering the castle started the final phase of the purge. At this time, Mark let May and the girls participate in killing the remaining unnecessary people inside. In truth, Mark wanted to do this on his own. However, Amihan complained as Mark totally finished the battle with Lucerio too fast. They barely had to do anything at all. However, it was not like Mark wanted to end it fast in the first place. He was even training to get used to his current speed. It was just Lucerio showed something dangerous and had to end it as fast as possible. What Mark mentioned was that last attack of Lucerio before he was forced to use his empath abilities to kill and disable every enemy. He was quite sure that it was not just some illusion magic but actually using an illusion to copy a currently existing object. In that case with Mark, Lucerio used the incoming attack and replicated it all to surround him. Mark could not confirm it for sure, but it felt dangerous. Although he might be able to deal with it to some extent, May and the others would surely fall victim to that attack. It was better to end it and not gamble. Now that Lucerio was gone, Mark could let the others play. And to say, it was a massacre. The black duendes never stood a chance after their magic and illusions had been rendered useless. Like as they thought, they found the queens and other important people hiding in a secret room below the castle. And as Lumeria requested, the queens were spared. Well, just 5 of them. Aside from the queen that Mark killed outside, the third queen was also killed. The moment that Mark's group entered the secret room by force, the third queen attacked together with the remaining princes and princesses. Mark actually wanted to keep a few of them if they showed promise. But the way they behaved in front of Mark's group, he decided to spare none. The important people of the castle, like the other general, Elio, and the one that maintained the barrier, Ulfur, were also there. And, of course, Mark ended their lives. Unexpectedly, that demon, Ulfur, also gave Mark a unique attributed crystal after his death. Lastly, the succubus, Ilvela. Mark kept her alive. According to Lumeria, she was more or less the bridge of the alliance between the black duendes and the demons. If Mark wanted information about what the demons' plans were, Ilvela was the best person to investigate. And there, the end of the kingdom of black duendes was secured. Outside, the battle was still raging as the remaining slaves fought for revenge. Chaflar, who was left outside the castle, also joined the fray, killing every enemy it saw with a breath of its flames. Mark's group also joined in, laying the whole kingdom to a huge pile of rubble. It was far better to kill as many demons here as possible. Not only the army of demons would weaken, but the lack of soldiers would delay their plans further. After another 2 hours of battle, only a handful of humans were left in the kingdom. All life had been extinguished, and the kingdom of black duendes was no more. All that was left was to plunder the treasures of the kingdom, and then meet with the slaves that did not give up despite the circumstances. Day 59 p.m. Kingdom of Black Duendes, Spirit Dimension. The scorched street, walls, and buildings burnt and engulfed by the flames of darkness. The ashes and dust of beings of the night littered the streets, blown by the cold breeze of midnight. The bodies of the mortals that littered the ground, looking at the sky with face dawned of satisfaction. These mortals might have died, but it was also their release. In the least, they died fighting, not cowering. Among the inhabitants of this small kingdom, the duendes, the demons, the other races, and the human slaves, all had died but a few. However, all the other races that managed to survive long had fled. And in the middle of the raging flames of darkness, only a few human slaves remained. All of them sat on the ground, tired, injured, hungry, and lost. After all the suffering, the sadness, the despair, these slaves finally achieved freedom. But now that they had it, none of them knew what they should do next. Escape. Leave this place. But after that, what? This dimension was filled with danger. A few of them, humans, that were heavily malnourished and injured would not last long in the wilderness of this dimension. Going home. Where? To Earth. How? None of them even knew whether they would be able to live their lives here. If they did manage to get back, would they be able to go back to their old lives? All of them were lost, not knowing what to do. There's only 9 left, huh? That was when the slaves turned their heads as they heard the voice nearby. At first, they thought that it was an enemy. But as they saw the man that started this bloody battle, they all relaxed. It was not like they were not wary of the man. It was just that even if the man wanted to do anything to them, there was no way for them to do anything to retaliate. 9 weakened humans, against the being that destroyed this place in a few hours, only a fool would start a fight against this man. In the least, this man let them take revenge into their hands. If he wanted to take their lives at this moment like the others that were engulfed in flames, they would not resist. The slaves were tired. If there was no decent future for them, they would rather die here. Unfortunately, like most people, they were afraid of taking their own lives. It was when they noticed the man was not alone. They did remember that during the battle, they saw several people, even children, fight the demons. That, however, was from a distance and thought that they were all demons. Now, however, they could not help but look at this group. Aside from the wings and the sinister-looking armor, the man was a human. The little girls and the beautiful woman beside him also appeared to be human. But then, humans that were too powerful to be able to trample over this place into ruin was quite unbelievable. The man then approached them. All they did was stare in silence. Not only were they tired, but it was better to stay silent than accidentally offend this godly being. Unexpectedly, the man just passed by the ones nearest to him and approached a pair of male slaves. The older man was quite heavily injured with a claw wound that almost sliced his entire left forearm. The man's bones were even exposed if not for the younger man desperately tying the injury with the torn cloth they had that was already heavily soaked with blood. The man stared at the 2 slaves for a bit. He seemed to be checking the wound, or maybe, another thing. To the shock of the slaves, the man stretched his hand forwards, and a small black hole appeared in front of him. His hand entered the black hole for a few seconds, and when he pulled his hand out, he was already holding a sealed test tube with a questionable liquid in it. That was when he spoke to the 2. "Use this. Make him drink it," the man said as he offered the test tube to the wounded slave. The younger slave hesitated whether he would accept it for the old man or not. "It's for his wound. Take it or he will die from blood loss sooner or later," the man urged, and his words made the younger slave take the test tube. It was better to gamble than to let the older man die. The older slave drank the contents of the test tube, and miraculously, the bleeding slowly stopped. The wound was still there, but it seemed that it healed to some extent. Due to this act, the slaves started to look at the man with hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was not like the demons that enslaved them. But then, after the old slave drank the miraculous medicine, the man that gave it started to return to his group, thwarting their hopes away. However, the man spoke once more. "If you people still want to live, follow me. I don't mind bringing you all back to Earth, though it might not be the Earth that you all know anymore." Without waiting for any reply, the man walked away. The slaves were confused about what he meant by his words. However, they wanted to live. They wanted to go home. That was all that mattered. Mark walked back with the girls. The slaves were slowly following behind them. It might be faster to just fly back to the castle where the others were waiting. However, Mark wanted to see the remains of the town as well as find things that might interest him. And along the way, Mark would wave Ignis, absorbing the black flames that it unleashed before. These flames were special and under their control. It was better if the black flames were contained to find things in the rubble easier. Unfortunately, there were very few things to collect. A lot were either burned or damaged by the battle. Aside from the weapons and armor of the soldiers that were left on the ground after they turned to dust, Mark only took a few items that looked interesting. What made Mark happy was how he was able to extract magical energy from the dead bodies that did not turn to dust after they died. Although it was not too much, a few crystals were still valuable. They arrived back at the castle with the 9 slaves in tow. Sure enough, they were quite surprised to see Edsel and Pearl. Compared to the whole group, these teens were the ones that appeared human the most. Well, they were human, technically, and Edsel had yet to awaken his father's blood. Aside from the members of the group, another person was waiting. It was no other than Ilvela, who already resigned to her fate as a prisoner. Well, she did not want to die, and all she could do was to behave. As for the other queens, they were not present. They were already given their freedom and they were all preparing to return to their homes, or at least, try to find them. By the looks of it, they would be traveling together for safety. Actually, they could travel together with Mark's group. However, they rather not. They were all afraid of Mark, especially he caused the destruction of this place with only a small group in tow. Those things aside, Mark had one last thing to do in this place. Prepare for the night while we scout the place one more time. We will leave in the morning. Mark said as he led the 3 girls, May and Emihan, away. They were going back to the secret room where the queens hid before with the other people of the castle. It was because that place was also the hidden treasury where the most valuable things of the Black Duendes were stored. It was quite a hassle to go down a long flight of stairs. Fortunately, like the stone fortress, the Black Duendes used glowing stones to illuminate the place. It did not take long and they reached the chamber where they fought the princes and princesses. The dust and blood were still fresh, together with a few bodies of dead demons that remained. Leaving that chamber, they faced a door deep inside it. Unfortunately, they were immediately stopped by something. Gurgur, the door smeed to be sealed with magic, May said, looking at the door that was about 3 meters tall with exquisite design. This door was obviously the treasury that even the queens were not allowed to enter. Let's try this, Mark said as he touched the door. Crackle. A strong electric charge entered Mark's body. Kya. Emihan, who was sitting on Mark's shoulder, cried out as she flew instantly while massaging her bottom. Master. Why would you do that? Emihan complained. My bad, Mark snickered. You all get away first. I'll try to destroy this seal. Emihan, with her numbed bottom, flew away instantly. May and the 3 girls also retreated. And there, Mark sent a surge of miasma unto the door. Crackle. Surges of electricity spread out like lightning from the door as it tried to resist the miasma that Mark was using to break it. However, its resistance was not enough for the miasma that started to absorb it. Crash. With a loud sound of glass breaking, the magical seal of the door was broken. All right, let's go. Mark called the girls as he pushed the doors open. It was unexpectedly heavy, and he had to enhance his in order to open the door enough to let everyone inside. And there, Mark and his group were quite amazed. Bars of gold was piled up on one side. This might worth several million if sold back then before the outbreak. Now, however, these gold bars were worthless. Fortunately, there were other things, and the most valuable ones were on display. First was the heads of monsters that Mark had never seen before. Like how hunters would display the heads of their game, the heads of the magical animals were hanged on the walls the same way. And, of course, this was of no value to Mark, and they had to continue on. The displays were quite interesting. There were exquisitely made swords and armor. There were even some that were imbued with magical properties. A good example was one armor that could create a magical barrier to its wearer. There were also some magical weapons. Unfortunately, none of the swords were on par with Ignis. For now, however, this equipment did not matter. Not only Mark but the girls were also paying attention to something else. At the furthest end of the treasury, there was a huge humanoid figure. Of course, it was not an enemy, and Mark's group approached it. It was huge with its 4-meter height. With a body made of an unknown metal, the hulking humanoid figure looked like a statue. But for Mark, it was not a statue. Definitely not. A golem, huh? Mark said as he knocked on the metal legs of the figure. That was right, it was a golem. Looking at its strange design, the magical carvings on its armor, and even the sensation where it seemed to be able to channel magical energy in its body. Unfortunately, the golem was not moving. For something like this to be stored here and not deployed for something else, this thing might be broken. Mark looked around the golem and noticed the stack of papers that was placed near the broken golem. And to say, Mark was right. The papers had something to do with the golem. The magic circles that were engraved inside its body, the missing parts needed, and even its origins were written. Unexpectedly, this golem was already fixed by the black duendes. However, they were lacking one thing to make it move. The black duendes did not have a core that would serve as the golem's brain and allow it to move.